Deep in the mountains of Romania, beyond a forest where sunlight barely touched the ground, stood an ancient castle abandoned for over 500 years. People called it Vladmir Castle. No birds flew above it. No animals went near it. And after sunset, no human dared to speak its name. According to old legends, the castle once belonged to Lord Alexander Vladimir, a powerful ruler feared across Europe during the 15th century. Some called him a genius. Others called him a monster. Villagers whispered horrifying stories about people disappearing inside the castle walls. Travelers who entered were never seen again. But the strangest part of the legend was this. Lord Vladimir was never buried. No grave. No coffin. Nothing. Only silence. For centuries, historians believed the stories were myths. Until 2026. A British historian named Ethan Walker discovered an ancient hidden diary inside a museum in London. The final page contained a disturbing message written in Latin. The Lord still walks after midnight. Inside the diary was also an old map leading directly to Vladmir Castle. At the bottom of the page, someone had written 3 words in dark red ink. Do not enter. But Ethan ignored the warning. 3 days later, he arrived in Romania during the middle of winter. The locals became terrified the moment they saw the map. An old man inside a small cafe slowly whispered. That castle is cursed, evil lives there. Ethan smiled nervously. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in history. That night, heavy snow covered the mountains as Ethan walked toward the forest leading to the castle. The deeper he walked, the quieter the world became. No wind. No insects. Nothing. Then suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. Crunch. 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 Ethan turned around quickly. Nobody was there. His breathing became heavier. Then he noticed something horrifying in the snow behind him. Fresh footprints. Large footprints. Following him. But they suddenly stopped. Just a few feet away. As if whoever made them had simply vanished. A cold fear crawled down Ethan's spine. For the first time that night, he felt he was not alone. And far above the forest trees, a pair of glowing red eyes watched him from the darkness. The storm grew worse as Ethan continued deeper into the forest. Snow fell heavily from the black sky, covering the ground like a white grave. Yet something felt wrong. The cold around him did not feel natural. It felt alive. Watching. Waiting. Ethan tightened his coat and checked the old map again under the weak light of his flashlight. According to the map, Vladmir Castle should have appeared by now. But the forest seemed endless. The trees looked twisted and unnatural, their branches stretching like skeletal fingers across the sky. Then suddenly, the wind stopped. Complete silence filled the forest. Ethan froze. Even his own footsteps sounded distant now. That was when he heard it. A woman crying somewhere between the trees. Soft. Painful. Almost whispering. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again. Closer this time. The crying slowly turned into desperate sobbing. Against his better judgment, Ethan followed the sound through the snow. The flashlight shook slightly in his hand as he pushed past frozen branches. Then he saw her. A woman dressed in an old white gown stood between the trees with her back facing him. Her long black hair moved gently in the freezing air. Hello. Ethan called carefully. The woman didn't move. You need help? Still nothing. Ethan slowly stepped closer. His heartbeat became faster with every step. Then the woman spoke in a weak voice. He never lets us leave. Ethan stopped walking. Something about her voice sounded unnatural. Almost broken. Who? Ethan asked. The woman slowly lifted one pale hand and pointed toward the mountain above the forest. And there, for the first time, Ethan saw Vladmir Castle. Huge black towers rose through the snowstorm like a giant shadow. The castle looked less like a building, and more like something alive. Dark windows stared across the forest like empty eyes. Lightning flashed across the sky. For a single second, Ethan thought he saw a figure standing at the castle windows, watching him. Then darkness returned. Ethan looked back toward the woman. But she was gone. Completely gone. No footprints. No sound. Nothing. Only untouched snow. Fear twisted inside Ethan's chest. He quickly walked toward the castle, trying to convince himself there had to be a logical explanation. But deep down, he already knew something was terribly wrong. After nearly an hour of climbing the frozen mountain path, Ethan finally reached the enormous iron gates of Vladmir Castle. The gates were covered in rust and strange ancient symbols. Some symbols looked almost burned into the metal. At the center of the gate was the image of a dragon wrapped around a crown. Ethan carefully pushed against the gate. To his surprise, it slowly opened by itself with a loud metallic scream. The sound echoed through the mountains. Inside the castle walls, darkness covered everything. Snow had gathered in the empty courtyard. Broken statues stood like silent guards. And near the center of the courtyard, Ethan noticed dozens of stone crosses buried beneath the snow. Graves. Far too many graves. He walked closer and brushed snow away from one of the stones. The name carved into it made his blood run cold. Elizabeth Walker. Same last name. His last name. Ethan stared in disbelief. Impossible. The grave was dated 1491. More than 500 years ago. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind him. The iron gates slammed shut on their own. Ethan spun around in panic and ran toward them. He pulled hard against the frozen metal. They wouldn't move. Then slowly, very slowly, a deep voice echoed from somewhere above the castle walls. A voice that sounded ancient. Inhuman. Welcome home, Ethan. Ethan's entire body froze. The voice that had spoken his name was not human. It sounded deep. Rotten. Like something speaking from inside a grave. Snow blew violently through the castle courtyard as Ethan slowly looked up toward the dark towers above him. But the windows were empty now. Only darkness stared back. His breathing became uneven. For the first time since arriving in Romania, Ethan wanted to leave. Immediately. He rushed back toward the giant iron gates and pulled with all his strength. Nothing. The gates refused to move. Then suddenly, a loud creaking sound echoed through the courtyard. Ethan turned sharply. The enormous castle doors had opened by themselves. Warm yellow light flickered from inside the entrance hall. But that was impossible. The castle had been abandoned for centuries. Ethan slowly stepped backward. Every instinct inside him screamed not to enter. Then the deep voice echoed again. You have your mother's eyes. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Nobody knew about his mother. She had disappeared when he was only 6 years old. No body had ever been found. Only one thing remained from her disappearance. An old silver necklace carved with the same dragon symbol he had seen on the castle gates. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled the necklace out with shaking fingers. The moment he touched it, the castle lights suddenly grew brighter. As if the building itself had awakened. A freezing wind rushed through the courtyard. And somewhere deep inside the castle, a woman screamed. Not a normal scream. A scream filled with unbearable pain. Ethan should have run. But instead, he walked toward the open doors. The giant wooden entrance slowly closed behind him the moment he stepped inside. Boom! Darkness swallowed the outside world. The entrance hall was enormous. Dust-covered chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Almost rotten. Then he noticed something disturbing. The dust on the floor was untouched. Except for one set of footprints. Fresh footprints. Someone had walked through the hall recently. Very recently. Ethan followed them carefully through a long corridor filled with broken mirrors. Most mirrors were cracked with age. But as Ethan passed one large mirror, he suddenly stopped. His reflection had disappeared. For one horrifying second. The mirror showed someone else standing behind him. A tall dark figure wearing an old black royal coat. Its face was pale as death. Its eyes completely black. Ethan spun around instantly. Nobody there. The hallway was empty. His breathing became faster. He looked back at the mirror again. Now his reflection had returned normally. "You are seeing things," he whispered to himself nervously. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. Suddenly, a loud bell echoed through the castle. One time. Then another. Then another. 12 times. Midnight. The moment the final bell rang, every candle inside the hallway suddenly lit itself at once. Whoosh! Ethan stumbled backward in fear. And then, he heard footsteps upstairs. Slow footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Walking directly above him. Step. 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 Something was moving inside the castle. And it was coming closer. The footsteps above Ethan's head suddenly stopped. Silence swallowed the castle once again. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, gripping his flashlight tightly. Then, a soft creaking sound echoed somewhere nearby. One of the doors along the corridor had slowly opened by itself. A faint golden light flickered inside the room. Ethan hesitated. Every part of him wanted to run back to the entrance. But curiosity pulled him forward. Slowly, he pushed the old wooden door open further. The room beyond looked untouched by time. Unlike the rest of the castle, this chamber was strangely clean. Candles burned softly around the walls. A fire crackled inside a giant stone fireplace. And hanging above it was the largest portrait Ethan had ever seen. A beautiful young woman stared down at him from the painting. She wore a dark red royal dress decorated with black jewels. Long black hair flowed over her shoulders. Her skin looked pale as moonlight. But it was her eyes that disturbed Ethan the most. Cold gray eyes. Almost alive. At the bottom of the portrait was a name carved in gold. Lady Isabella Vladmir. Ethan stepped closer to the painting. Something about the woman felt familiar. Then his blood turned cold. The woman in the portrait looked exactly like his missing mother. Not similar. Exactly the same. Same face. Same eyes. Same small scar near the eyebrow. Ethan's breathing became shaky. Impossible. The portrait looked centuries old. Suddenly, the fireplace behind him went out. Darkness flooded the room instantly. Only the candlelight remained. Then came the whisper. Right beside his ear. "You finally came back." Ethan spun around violently. Nobody there. His heartbeat pounded inside his chest. The room felt colder now. Much colder. Then slowly, a sound came from the portrait. Scratch. 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 Ethan turned toward it again. His flashlight trembled in his hand. The woman inside the painting was moving. Very slowly. Lady Isabella's eyes shifted toward him. Ethan stumbled backward in horror. The painted woman smiled. A long unnatural smile. Then, her hand pressed against the inside of the canvas, as if she were trapped behind it. Ethan screamed and fell backward onto the floor. The candles around the room suddenly extinguished one by one. Darkness consumed everything. And from somewhere inside the room, a woman began crying softly. Ethan quickly turned on his flashlight. The portrait now looked normal again. Completely still. No movement. No smile. Nothing. His breathing became heavy as he slowly stood up. That was when he noticed something horrifying. The painting had changed. Before, Lady Isabella had been standing alone. Now, a tall shadowy figure stood behind her. Its pale hand rested gently on her shoulder. And its face was scratched out completely. Then Ethan heard another sound behind the wall. A hidden mechanism. Grr. The giant portrait slowly moved sideways on its own. Behind it, a secret staircase descended deep underground beneath the castle. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. And with it came a terrible smell. The smell of death. Then Ethan heard whispering echo from the staircase. Dozens of voices speaking together. Repeating the same sentence again and again. He is awake. Ethan stood frozen before the hidden staircase. The whispers rising from below grew louder. He is awake. He has returned. The bloodline lives. The voices sounded weak. Broken. As if hundreds of dead people were speaking through rotten lungs. A freezing wind climbed from the darkness beneath the castle, carrying the horrible smell of decay. Ethan covered his nose with his sleeve. His mind screamed at him to leave. But another feeling had begun growing inside him. A terrible curiosity. He aimed the flashlight down the staircase. The stone steps descended so deep that the light could not reach the bottom. And along the walls, ancient symbols had been carved into the stone. The same dragon symbol. Again and again. Ethan swallowed nervously and began descending. Step. 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 The deeper he went, the colder the air became. Soon the sounds of the castle above completely disappeared. Only the whispers remained. The staircase finally opened into a massive underground tunnel. Water dripped slowly from the ceiling. Chains hung from the walls covered in rust. Then Ethan's flashlight revealed something horrifying. Human skeletons. Dozens of them. Some still chained to the walls. Others lying across the floor like discarded garbage. Many wore old royal clothing. Some skeletons were small enough to belong to children. Ethan's stomach twisted in horror. This wasn't just a castle. It was a prison. A slaughterhouse. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then the beam landed on writing scratched deeply into the stone wall. The words looked desperate. As if carved by someone dying. Do not trust the Lord. Beneath it, another message appeared. This one looked newer. Fresh. Almost recently written. He steals their faces. Ethan stepped back slowly. A cold fear spread through his body. Then he heard it. Breathing. Very close behind him. Slow. Wet. Ethan turned instantly. The flashlight beam shook violently across the darkness. At first he saw nothing. Then, a figure slowly emerged from the shadows. A woman. Thin and pale. Wearing a torn black dress. Her long hair covered most of her face. But Ethan immediately noticed her eyes. Gray eyes. Exactly like the woman in the portrait. Exactly like his mother. The woman stared at him silently. Then in a weak voice, she whispered. You shouldn't have come here. Ethan could barely breathe. Who are you? He asked shakily. The woman took a slow step forward. Chains dragged behind her feet. He will never let you leave. Suddenly the tunnel shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then came a sound that made Ethan's blood freeze. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Somewhere deeper in the underground tunnels. Boom. 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 The pale woman's terrified expression changed instantly. She grabbed Ethan's arm tightly. Her hand felt ice cold. Hide, she whispered. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Closer. Then from the darkness ahead, a tall figure appeared. Ethan's flashlight nearly slipped from his hand. The man standing before him looked exactly like the portraits upstairs. Lord Alexandru Vladmir. Same pale face. Same black royal coat. Same cold gray eyes. But one thing was horribly different. His mouth. Dark blood covered his lips. And his smile stretched far too wide to be human. Lord Vladmir looked directly at Ethan. Then he spoke calmly. Welcome back to your family, Ethan. Ethan's body refused to move. Lord Alexandru Vladmir stood motionless in the darkness, staring directly into his eyes. The underground tunnel suddenly felt impossibly cold. The pale woman beside Ethan trembled in fear. But Vladmir looked calm. Almost pleased. Like a king finally welcoming someone home. The torchlight along the walls began lighting by itself one after another. Whoosh. 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 Orange flames stretched across the tunnel, revealing more horrors hidden in the darkness. Hundreds of names were carved into the stone walls. Thousands, perhaps. Some names were centuries old. Others looked recent. Very recent. Ethan's breathing became uneven as his eyes searched the wall. Then he saw it. Sarah Walker, 2004. His mother's name. His legs nearly collapsed beneath him. No, he whispered. Vladmir smiled slowly. She searched for the truth, exactly like you. Ethan's anger suddenly exploded through his fear. What did you do to her? The tunnel became silent. Then Vladmir stepped forward. His movements were unnatural. Too smooth. Almost floating. Your mother belonged to this castle. Ethan shook his head violently. You're lying. Vladmir's smile widened. Your blood carries my name. The words echoed through the tunnel like thunder. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Impossible. Vladmir slowly raised one pale hand toward the dragon necklace hanging from Ethan's neck. That necklace has passed through our family for over 500 years. The pale woman suddenly grabbed Ethan's arm harder. Her terrified voice trembled. Don't listen to him. Vladmir's expression darkened instantly. For the first time, anger appeared in his dead gray eyes. The torches flickered violently. Then Ethan noticed something horrifying. The woman beside him had no reflection in the water covering the tunnel floor. None at all. Vladmir spoke softly. Do you know who she is? The woman slowly stepped backward. Fear filled her face. But Vladmir continued. Look carefully, Ethan. Ethan raised the flashlight toward her trembling face. And then he realized the horrifying truth. The woman was not young. Her skin only appeared human in darkness. Under the light. It looked cracked. Decaying. Almost corpse-like. One side of her face had begun rotting away completely. Ethan stepped backward in horror. Tears filled the woman's eyes. I tried to escape, she whispered weakly. Vladmir's smile returned. This is what happens to those who betray me. Suddenly. The woman screamed. Her body twisted violently as dark veins spread across her skin. Bones cracked loudly beneath her flesh. Ethan stumbled away in terror. Within seconds, the woman collapsed to the ground motionless. Dead. Or something worse. Vladmir looked down at her without emotion. Then slowly raised his eyes toward Ethan again. She was once your aunt. Silence filled the tunnel. Ethan felt his mind breaking apart. His aunt had disappeared 20 years ago. His mother had always told him she vanished during a trip to Europe. But now, the truth stood before him. Vladmir slowly moved closer. The air itself seemed darker around him. Your family has always belonged to this castle. Ethan backed away until his shoulders hit the cold stone wall. Then Vladmir whispered something that shattered him completely. Your mother is still alive. Ethan stared at Lord Vladmir in complete shock. My mother is alive. The ancient ruler smiled slowly. But there was no warmth in his expression. Only darkness. Only hunger. The torches along the tunnel walls flickered violently as if the castle itself were breathing. Vladmir turned without another word and began walking deeper into the underground passage. His long black coat dragged across the wet stone floor. After a few steps, he stopped. Without looking back, he said softly. Come with me, and you will finally understand who you are. Ethan's heart pounded painfully inside his chest. Every instinct told him not to follow. But if his mother was truly alive, he had no choice. Keeping his flashlight raised, Ethan slowly followed Vladmir deeper underground. The tunnels twisted endlessly beneath the castle like a maze. Some corridors were lined with iron cages. Others contained old torture devices covered in dried blood. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the walls became. Ancient symbols covered nearly every surface now. The dragon symbol appeared everywhere. Painted in black. Carved into stone. Even burned into metal doors. Then Ethan noticed another disturbing detail. The temperature was becoming warmer. Not colder. Almost as if something enormous lived beneath the castle. Soon they reached a giant wooden door reinforced with black iron chains. The door itself looked ancient beyond imagination. At its center was a sentence written in Latin. Vladmir placed one pale hand against the door. The chains suddenly unlocked themselves with loud metallic cracks. Clang. 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 The giant door slowly opened inward. And Ethan immediately wished it hadn't. Beyond the doorway stood a massive underground chamber lit by hundreds of candles. The sight inside nearly stopped his heart. People filled the chamber. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Men. Women. Children. All standing completely still in silence. Their skin looked pale gray. Their eyes empty. Like lifeless dolls. Some wore modern clothes. Others wore clothing from different centuries. Ethan realized the horrifying truth immediately. These were the missing people. Every person who had ever disappeared inside Vladmir Castle. Still here. Still trapped. But not truly alive. One woman slowly turned her head toward Ethan. His blood froze instantly. It was the crying woman he had seen in the forest. Her white dress was now stained dark with blood. And beside her stood something even worse. A little boy no older than 10. Half of his face had rotted away. Yet somehow, he was still breathing. The chamber suddenly filled with whispering voices. Hundreds of whispers speaking together at once. Leave. Run. Save yourself. Ethan backed away in horror. What are they? He whispered. Vladmir answered calmly. My kingdom. Then Ethan noticed something at the far end of the chamber. A giant black throne made from bones. Human bones. And sitting upon it. was a woman wearing a long dark gown. Her head rested downward motionlessly. Long black hair covered her face. At first Ethan thought she was dead. Then slowly, the woman lifted her head. Ethan's flashlight slipped from his hand. The woman sitting on the throne was his mother. But something about her looked terribly wrong. Her skin was unnaturally pale. Dark veins spread beneath her eyes. And when she smiled weakly at him, Ethan saw sharp teeth growing inside her mouth. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered softly, "Ethan, you should never have come here." Ethan's entire world shattered. His mother sat before him on the throne of bones, looking both alive and horribly dead. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "Mom," he whispered weakly. Tears rolled down Sarah Walker's pale face. She slowly stood from the black throne. The chamber became silent. Every trapped soul turned toward her at once. Watching. Waiting. Ethan ran toward her without thinking. But before he could reach her, Lord Vladmir suddenly appeared between them. Too fast. Far too fast to be human. His gray eyes darkened. "Careful, Ethan." Sarah's expression instantly filled with fear. "Don't touch him," she screamed. Vladmir slowly turned his head toward her. The air inside the chamber seemed to grow heavier. Then Ethan noticed something horrifying. Dark veins suddenly spread across Sarah's throat as if invisible hands were choking her. She collapsed to her knees, gasping painfully. Vladmir spoke calmly without even looking at her. "You still forget who controls this place." Ethan's anger exploded. He charged toward Vladmir and struck him across the face. The entire chamber fell silent. For 1 second. Nobody moved. Then slowly, Vladmir turned back toward Ethan. Smiling. Not angry. Smiling. And Ethan realized the horrifying truth. The punch had done absolutely nothing. Vladmir's skin felt like stone. The ancient ruler stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. His voice became soft. Almost gentle. "You have his spirit." Ethan clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The candles across the chamber suddenly burned darker. Blue flames rose from the wicks. And the shadows along the walls began moving unnaturally. Vladmir slowly raised his arms. Ethan's entire world shattered. His mother sat before him on the throne of bones, looking both alive and horribly dead. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "Mom," he whispered weakly. Tears rolled down Sarah Walker's pale face. She slowly stood from the black throne. The chamber became silent. Every trapped soul turned toward her at once. Watching. Waiting. Ethan ran toward her without thinking. But before he could reach her, Lord Vladmir suddenly appeared between them. Too fast. Far too fast to be human. His gray eyes darkened. "Careful, Ethan." Sarah's expression instantly filled with fear. "Don't touch him," she screamed. Vladmir slowly turned his head toward her. The air inside the chamber seemed to grow heavier. Then Ethan noticed something horrifying. Dark veins suddenly spread across Sarah's throat as if invisible hands were choking her. She collapsed to her knees, gasping painfully. Vladmir spoke calmly without even looking at her. "You still forget who controls this place." Ethan's anger exploded. He charged toward Vladmir and struck him across the face. The entire chamber fell silent. For 1 second. Nobody moved. Then slowly, Vladmir turned back toward Ethan. Smiling. Not angry. Smiling. And Ethan realized the horrifying truth. The punch had done absolutely nothing. Vladmir's skin felt like stone. The ancient ruler stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. His voice became soft. Almost gentle. You have his spirit. Ethan clenched his fists. Who are you? The candles across the chamber suddenly burned darker. Blue flames rose from the wicks. And the shadows along the walls began moving unnaturally. Vladmir slowly raised his arms. 500 years ago, this castle belonged to a king feared across all of Europe. As he spoke, the chamber around Ethan seemed to change. The walls faded into visions of the past. Screaming soldiers. Burning villages. Mountains covered in bodies. Ethan watched in horror as a younger Vladmir stood among the dead wearing black armor soaked in blood. Men betrayed me, Vladmir whispered. The visions continued changing rapidly. Dark rituals. Ancient symbols. People chained beneath the castle. Then. A woman appeared in the vision. Beautiful. Pale. Wearing a black crown. Ethan's chest tightened. It was Lady Isabella from the portrait. Vladmir's voice became darker. She promised me eternity. The vision showed Isabella cutting her own hand with a silver blade. Black blood poured onto ancient symbols beneath the castle. The ground itself began opening. And from the darkness below, something enormous moved. Not human. Not animal. Something ancient. The vision disappeared instantly. The chamber returned. Ethan's breathing became uneven. What was that thing? For the first time in centuries. Fear appeared in Vladmir's eyes. Only for a second. But Ethan saw it. Vladmir looked toward the darkness beneath the throne. Then whispered quietly. The true ruler of this castle. Suddenly. A deep growl echoed from somewhere below the chamber floor. The bone throne began shaking violently. The trapped soul started screaming in terror. And Sarah looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes. It's waking up. The growl beneath the chamber floor became louder. Deeper. More monstrous. The entire underground kingdom trembled violently. Cracks spread across the stone walls as dust rained from the ceiling. The trapped souls began screaming in panic. Some fell to their knees crying. Others covered their ears as if the sound itself caused unbearable pain. And then. The throne of bones started moving. Slowly. Something beneath it was rising. Ethan backed away beside his mother. Sarah grabbed his arm tightly, her cold fingers shaking. We have to leave now, she whispered desperately. But Lord Vladmir remained completely still. Watching. Waiting. Almost afraid. The bone throne suddenly shattered apart. Crack. Human bones exploded across the chamber floor. A massive crack opened beneath the castle, releasing freezing black smoke into the air. And from the darkness below, something opened its eyes. Two enormous glowing eyes stared upward from the abyss. Not red. Not human. Pure white. The chamber lights instantly died. Darkness swallowed everything. People screamed. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and switched it on desperately. The weak beam revealed absolute chaos. The trapped souls were running blindly through the chamber. Some were dragged into darkness by invisible hands. Others simply vanished into the black smoke. Then Ethan heard it. A voice. Not spoken aloud. Inside his head. Ancient. Hungry. The blood heir has returned. Ethan nearly collapsed as pain exploded through his skull. Images flooded his mind. Thousands of memories that did not belong to him. Wars. Executions. Rituals. A creature sleeping beneath the mountain for centuries. Feeding. Waiting. And always demanding blood. Ethan screamed and dropped to his knees. Sarah held him tightly. Fight it, she cried. Across the chamber, Lord Vladmir finally spoke, not with power, but fear. Stay below. The darkness answered him with another growl powerful enough to shake the entire castle. Then, a gigantic claw slowly emerged from the abyss. Ethan's flashlight trembled violently. The creature's skin looked blacker than night itself. Not flesh. Not fur. Something unnatural. Ancient symbols glowed across its enormous body like burning scars. And attached to the creature by massive chains were thousands of human skeletons. The horrifying beast pulled itself higher from the pit. The trapped souls began screaming louder than ever. Vladmir stepped backward for the first time. The monster's glowing eyes suddenly locked onto Ethan. The voice returned inside his head. You belong to me. Suddenly Sarah stepped in front of Ethan. Tears rolled down her pale face. Then she removed the silver dragon necklace from Ethan's neck. Vladmir's expression changed instantly. Pure terror. "No," he shouted. Sarah raised the necklace toward the creature. The dragon symbol suddenly began glowing bright red. The chamber shook violently. And Ethan finally understood. The necklace was never protection. It was a seal. And it was breaking. The glowing necklace burned bright red inside Sarah's trembling hands. The monstrous creature beneath the castle roared so loudly that the stone walls began collapsing around them. Huge cracks tore across the chamber floor. The trapped souls screamed in terror as darkness flooded the underground kingdom. Lord Vladmir's face twisted with fear for the very first time in centuries. "Stop her," he shouted. But it was too late. Sarah turned toward Ethan, tears falling from her pale gray eyes. For one brief moment, she looked like his real mother again. Not the broken creature the castle had turned her into. Just his mother. She gently touched Ethan's face. "Listen carefully," she whispered. The monster below continued rising from the abyss. Its massive claws ripped through the stone floor while chains snapped violently around its body. The castle itself sounded alive now. Screaming. Dying. Sarah placed the glowing necklace into Ethan's shaking hands. "Our family was chosen centuries ago to keep this thing trapped beneath the mountain." Ethan stared at her in horror. "What thing is it?" Sarah looked toward the abyss. And fear filled her face. "Not a demon, not a monster." Her voice trembled. "Something older." Suddenly the creature let out another deafening roar. The chamber ceiling collapsed partially, crushing dozens of trapped souls beneath falling stone. Lord Vladmir moved unnaturally fast toward Ethan. His face no longer looked human. Dark veins spread across his skin. His jaw stretched wider than possible. His gray eyes turned completely black. "Give me the seal," he roared. Ethan stumbled backward. Sarah suddenly stepped between them. Vladmir froze. Pain appeared across his face. Almost sadness. Then Sarah whispered softly. "You should have let death take you long ago." For the first time in centuries. Lord Vladmir looked weak. Human. Broken. Then he screamed in rage and lunged toward her. But Sarah turned toward Ethan one final time. "Run." She crushed the necklace in her hand. Boom. A massive wave of red light exploded through the chamber. The creature beneath the castle screamed in fury. The chains around its body suddenly tightened. Ancient symbols across the walls ignited like fire. Lord Vladmir was thrown violently backward into the abyss. His scream echoed endlessly into darkness. The trapped souls began disappearing one by one into glowing light. Finally free. The castle started collapsing completely. Stone pillars shattered. Floors cracked apart. Sarah smiled weakly at Ethan as her body slowly began turning to ash. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. "Mom." She stepped closer and kissed his forehead gently. "You ended the curse." Then. She vanished. Gone forever. The chamber exploded into darkness. Ethan ran through the collapsing tunnels as the castle died around him. Behind him, the monstrous creature roared one last time before the mountain itself sealed shut forever. And then, silence. 3 days later, rescue teams found Ethan unconscious near the frozen forest outside the ruins of Vladmir Castle. The entire mountain had partially collapsed. No entrance to the underground tunnels remained. Romanian authorities claimed the castle was destroyed by an earthquake. Nobody believed Ethan's story. Historians denied Lord Vladmir had ever existed. The official records called it nothing more than an old legend. But Ethan knew the truth. Weeks later, back in London, Ethan developed the final photographs from his camera. Most images were ruined by darkness. Except one. The final photograph showed Ethan standing inside the underground chamber. Alone. But deep within the darkness behind him, two enormous white eyes stared directly at the camera. Still alive. Still waiting.